Welcome back. In this video, we will continue part 2 of our textbook, Business, Ownership and Entrepreneurship, specifically with chapter 5 on small business, entrepreneurship and franchising. In chapter 5, we look at the expanding world of small business, entrepreneurship and franchising. First, we define entrepreneurship and small businesses and examine the role of small business in the global economy. Then we will explore the advantages and disadvantages of small business ownership. We will also analyze why small businesses succeed or fail. Next, we discuss how an entrepreneur goes about starting a business and the challenges facing while doing so. Finally, we look at some trends in franchising. So let's get started. So what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is the process of creating and managing a business to achieve desired objectives. An entrepreneur is a person who risks his or her wealth, time and effort to develop an innovative product or way of doing something. They do this expecting to generate value for himself or herself and for others. Do you recognize these faces? Of course, smaller firms do not have to evolve into such highly visible companies to be successful like these ones in this table. But those entrepreneurial efforts that result in rapidly growing businesses gain visibility along with success. Entrepreneurs who have achieved success like Jack Ma from Alibaba, Bill Gates from Microsoft, Larry Page and Sergey Brin from Google, and of course the late Steve Jobs in Apple are some of the most well-known examples. This list shows some of the greatest entrepreneurs of the past few decades. Take a look. So entrepreneurs start with a small business. But what is a small business? The question is difficult to answer because the term small is relative. However, we define a small business as any independently owned and operated business that is not a dominant business in its competitive area or industry group. Also, small businesses' size standards are usually stated in number of employees or average annual sales. These standards also tend to change according to the industry. For instance, this is information for US. In the manufacturing section, 500 employees can be considered small. But in the wholesale section, 100 employees is considered small. If you see, also some of the services are defined only in terms of the annual sales. In the United States, 99.7% of all businesses are considered small, so a huge number. Check the definition of small and medium-sized businesses in your respective countries and please share them in the comments below. No matter how you define a small business, one fact is clear. They are vital for the global economy. More than 95% of all businesses are classified as small businesses, and they employ more than half of private workers. As you can see from this information, in this slide, small businesses contribute substantially to the world's economy and, of course, to the local communities in which they are located. This slide provides more details about the small business around the globe: Canada, New Zealand, US, China, and France. The energy, creativity, and innovative abilities of small business owners have resulted in many jobs for many people around the globe. However, as this information also shows, small businesses tend to die. For instance, in the US, only 50% of businesses survive the first 5 years. It is important to compare the cost of opening businesses throughout the world, especially in our class that we have people from many different countries. Inflation and currency exchanges, also differences in infrastructure and institutions create different rates. For instance, in 2014, India was one of the most expensive countries to open a business in, with Ireland being the least expensive. Also, the average days of opening a business in China was 38, in comparison with 1 day in New Zealand. According to this information, Singapore is one of the easiest countries to do business. The higher the cost and time to open a business, usually the higher the barriers to open one. There are many advantages to establishing and running a small business. They can be categorized into personal advantages and business advantages. Some of these advantages include independence, requiring less money to start and maintain a business, flexibility to adapt to changing market demands, and developing good personal relationships with customers and reputations for quality and service. Also, if the small business is a sole proprietorship, advantages include keeping all profits, easy and low cost of going into business, and keeping business information secret. As with any undertaking, of course, a small business ownership has also disadvantages. These include high risk of failure and, of course, high stress, undercapitalization, or limited ability to raise capital, managerial inexperience and incompetence, and inability to cope with growth. How can you be a successful young entrepreneur? Think about. Well, there has been some research, and the list of traits can be look a little long. Here we talk about being intuitive, productive, resourceful, charismatic, innovative, risk-taker, persistent, and friendly. You might think, wow, there is a lot. But one thing that all these people have in common is there is a motivation. And the motivation is related to having enough of working for something and somebody else. High-tech opportunities also could provide a motivation to open a new business, and especially for young people that are willing to learn the technology. Also, losing a job and deciding to start a business, or having an idea of a new product or service, or an opportunity presenting itself. So there are many ways in which people can become successful entrepreneurs. Even though people can become successful entrepreneurs, the reality is that small businesses tend to fail. This graph shows some statistics. For instance, almost 70% of the businesses survive at least 2 years. However, 44% of new firms survive 4 years. The number is a little bit higher for the first 5 years, 50%, and I think I already said this, 50% survive the first 5 years. And finally, only 31% survive at least 7 years.